The girl stood at the edge of the gas station parking lot, just beyond the reach of the buzzing fluorescent lights. 11 years old. Astrid. She had hair the color of straw dried in the sun, and eyes that were too old for her face, the pale blue of a winter sky that holds no warmth. She was always there. 6:15 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. Like a clockwork ghost, her posture was the first thing he'd noticed. Ramrod straight, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted. It wasn't confidence. It was a brace. The kind of posture a soldier adopts before inspection, a rigid defense against a world that was always looking for a flaw, a weakness to exploit. She held a small, clear plastic baggie. Inside were handmade bracelets, woven from cheap embroidery floss, in bright, cheerful colors that felt like a lie against the gray backdrop of the cracked asphalt and the diesel fumes. She never called out to anyone. She never approached a car. She just stood, a silent, waiting thing. And when a car did slow, usually a lone man, she would walk toward the passenger window with a smooth, practiced gait that had no childhood in it. The transaction was fast. A hand would emerge with a few crumpled bills. Her small hand would pass over the plastic bag. Sometimes, the hand from the car would try to linger, to brush her fingers. When it did, her arm would go stiff, her hand a claw, snatching back into her own space with the speed of a recoiling snake. Then she would turn, walk back to her spot, and wait again. The men weren't buying bracelets. Ezekiel Toussaint saw it all from the seat of his Harley-Davidson Road Glide, the deep obsidian paint job drinking the last of the evening light. He'd been a social worker for 26 years in the city's grimmest trenches before he retired. He'd spent another 19 riding with the Iron Covenant MC, a club of mostly retired cops, firefighters, and a few old-school union guys. Their vests were black leather, the club patch a stylized anvil clutched in two hands. Their motto, stitched below it, was simple: "We forge, we mend." Ezekiel was 63, a broad-shouldered black man with a neatly trimmed gray beard and hands thick with the memory of both paperwork and engine grease. He'd seen that posture before. He'd seen it on his own daughter, years ago, after a boy she'd trusted had broken something in her that had taken years to heal. The posture of a body that has become a fortress because the world has proven it needs to be. For 3 weeks, he just watched. He'd pull in for gas he didn't need, his bike rumbling a low counterpoint to the traffic on the highway. He would park at the farthest pump, number 8, and clean his windshield, check his tires, stretch his legs. He made himself a part of the landscape, as predictable as the flickering sign advertising lottery tickets. He learned her rhythm. 2 or 3 transactions an hour, Annie. Never more than $5, always the same cheap bracelets. He saw the car that dropped her off, a beat-up 2004 sedan with a spiderweb crack in the windshield and a bumper held on with duct tape. He saw the woman driving, her face a mask of exhaustion and something that looked a lot like despair. Astrid noticed him, of course. Her eyes, which missed nothing, flickered to him the first time he pulled in. They tracked him as he moved around his bike. She catalogued him: big man, biker vest, old, a potential threat, or just another piece of the scenery. By the second week, she seemed to have classified him as the latter. He was just the old biker who showed up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He never approached. He never stared. He just was. He knew what this was. It wasn't the worst-case scenario, not yet, but it was the doorway to it. A child learning that her presence, her proximity, her youth, had a price tag. Men were paying for the 5-second fantasy of interacting with a young girl, a transaction that felt safer than the alternative, but was built on the same rotten foundation. They were buying a feeling, and she was the one selling it, piece by tiny piece. Her mother, in the car, was likely desperate. A single mom, maybe, trying to keep the lights on, telling herself this was harmless. Just bracelets? Just a few dollars. Ezekiel knew better. Desperation was a current that pulled you out to sea, and this girl was already in over her head. He saw the way her gaze would sometimes drift past the cars, past the highway, to the sliver of horizon visible between two warehouses. A longing so sharp it was almost a physical thing. It was the start of the 4th week when he decided he'd been part of the landscape long enough. He wasn't going to fix this. He couldn't. Not like you fix a leaky faucet. But he could be a rock in the current, something to hold on to. The work of mending wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up. That was the whole job. Just showing up. He filled his tank for real this time, the pump clicking off at $12.47. He paid inside, buying a bottle of water and a bag of salted peanuts. Then, instead of getting back on his bike, he walked toward the edge of the parking lot. He didn't walk directly at her. He walked parallel to her spot, stopping a good 20 feet away, near a concrete trash can. He leaned against the wall of the station, the brick cool against the leather of his vest. He opened the water, took a long swallow, and then opened the peanuts, shaking a few into his palm. She watched him, her body going rigid. The brace was back. Her hand, holding the bag of bracelets, tightened. He didn't look at her. He just ate his peanuts, one by one, and watched the traffic go by. He was a mountain, unmoving, unthreatening. He stayed for 10 minutes. A car slowed. The driver looked at Astrid, then at Ezekiel, and sped up. He hadn't intended that, but he filed the information away. His presence was a deterrent. Another car, a minivan this time, pulled up. A woman got out, went inside, came back out with a soda, and drove away. Astrid didn't move. After 10 minutes, Ezekiel crumpled the empty peanut bag, tossed it in the trash can, and walked back to his bike. He started the engine, the familiar roar filling the space, and pulled out onto the road without a backward glance. He'd be back Thursday. Hit subscribe if you believe no child should have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. That's a burden for adults to bear, and our job is to lighten their load, not add to it. Comment the name of your city and share this with someone who needs to know that simply showing up can be the start of everything. Thursday came, and so did Ezekiel. Same time, same gas pump. This time, he bought 2 bottles of water and a bag of jerky. He walked to the same spot, 20 feet away from her. He leaned against the wall, opened his water, and set the second, unopened bottle on the ground beside him. He ate his jerky slowly, methodically. He watched the cars. He felt her eyes on him, studying him, trying to figure out the angle. What did the big man want? In her world, everyone wanted something. A full 30 minutes passed. No cars stopped for her. She stood, her posture unwavering, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands. This was her time, her income. He was interfering. He was costing her money. He was about to pack up when she took a hesitant step toward him. Then another. She stopped 10 feet away, a gulf of cracked asphalt between them. Her voice was small, thin, but steady. "You're scaring them away." He chewed a piece of jerky, swallowed, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He didn't deny it. That, a fact. She nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. "They don't stop when you're here." He considered this. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time up close. Her face was smudged with dirt on one cheek. Her shoes were worn down at the heels, the canvas frayed. Maybe they're not the kind of people worth stopping for. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. She was processing his words, holding them up to the light of her own experience. "My mom says we need the money. For rent." He nodded slowly. "That's a hard thing. Needing money is a hard thing. He gestured with his chin toward the unopened water bottle on the ground. Thirsty? She hesitated. A gift with strings. Everything had strings. How much? The question hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. 11 years old. How much for a bottle of water? It's water, little bit. It's not for sale. It's for drinking, if you're thirsty. She watched him for another long moment. Then her eyes darted to the bottle and back to his face. She gave a slight shake of her head. Not today. She couldn't accept. Not yet. She turned and walked back to her spot. Ezekiel finished his jerky, drank his water, and left. The second bottle remained on the pavement, a silent offering. When he glanced in his rearview mirror a quarter-mile down the road, it was gone. This became their ritual. Every Tuesday, every Thursday. He'd arrive at 6:15 p.m. He'd buy 2 drinks, sometimes water, sometimes orange juice, once a chocolate milk that he saw her eye from a distance. He'd place one on the ground and lean against the wall. He never crowded her. He never pushed. He just existed in her space, a quiet, constant presence. Sometimes she would talk, short, declarative sentences. It's hot today. That car is ugly. I saw a dog earlier. He would respond in kind. Sure is. Looks like a shoebox on wheels. What kind of dog? He learned her name was Astrid. He learned she was in 6th grade, but she did her schoolwork online because they moved around a lot. He learned she liked the color purple, not the bright, happy colors of the bracelets she sold. She liked the deep purple of a twilight sky. One Thursday in late August, a month into their strange, silent friendship, a heavy rain started falling. It wasn't a gentle shower. It was a downpour, the kind that turns roads into rivers in minutes. He saw her from under the gas station's awning. She was getting soaked, her thin t-shirt plastered to her skin, her straw-colored hair dark and dripping. But she didn't move. She just stood in her spot, braced against the deluge. The sedan was nowhere in sight. Ezekiel walked out into the rain. He didn't have an umbrella. The water ran down his face and soaked his vest. He walked right up to her and stood beside her, sharing the miserable weather. You're going to catch a cold, Astrid. She looked up at him, rain dripping from her chin. I have to wait. Mom said not to leave this spot. He understood. An order was an order. For a child in a precarious world, rules were survival. All right, we'll wait together. So they stood there, the two of them, a giant of a man and a slip of a girl, getting drenched in the parking lot of a gas station. The rain washed the grime from the asphalt, and for a moment, the world smelled clean. After 5 minutes, she was shivering, her teeth chattering. He took off his leather vest. It was heavy, soaked through, but the fleece lining was still mostly dry. He held it out. Here, put this on. She looked at the vest, at the Iron Covenant patch, at him. It's okay. It's not okay. You're freezing. Put it on. You're in charge. You can give it back whenever you want. She hesitated. Then slowly she reached out and took it. The thing was massive on her, swallowing her whole. It smelled of leather, rain, and him. She pulled it tight around herself, her small, shivering frame lost in its folds. She looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. The thought brought a lump to Ezekiel's throat. They stood in silence for another 10 minutes before the beat-up sedan finally pulled in. A woman with a frantic, pinched face leaned across the passenger seat and threw the door open. Petra! Astrid, get in! What are you doing? Astrid looked at Ezekiel. He gave a small nod. Go on. She started to shrug off the vest. Keep it for now, he said. It'll keep you warm on the way home. Bring it back Tuesday. She clutched it tighter, gave him a look he couldn't quite decipher. Not gratitude, not yet, but something like it, and scurried into the car. The door slammed shut, and the car sped away. Ezekiel stood in the rain for a moment longer, feeling the cold seep into his bones. It was a good kind of cold. The kind that reminds you you're alive. If you're finding value in this story, and you believe in the power of quiet consistency, do me a favor and hit that hype button right now. It's free, it takes less than a second, and it tells the algorithm that stories about patience and trust are worth sharing. It helps more than you know. Now, back to the story. The following Tuesday, Astrid was there at 6:15 p.m. as always. She was holding his vest, folded neatly. She walked right up to him as he was getting off his bike. Here. She held it out. He took it from her. Thanks for letting me borrow it. Anytime. You stay dry? She nodded. He put the vest back on. It felt different now. It had held her. It had kept her warm. He bought his 2 drinks, as usual, and they took up their positions. But this time, the distance between them was smaller. 15 feet instead of 20. A week later, she asked the question he'd been dreading and expecting. They were watching a man in a new BMW convertible buy a pack of cigarettes. He was handsome, silver-haired, wearing an expensive watch. He glanced over at Astrid, and his smile was all wrong. Ezekiel unconsciously took a step forward, and the man's smile vanished. He got in his car and peeled out of the lot. Astrid watched him go, her expression flat. He would have paid 20 for 2 bracelets. Ezekiel didn't say anything. He just waited. She knows what men pay for. The words were spoken so quietly he almost didn't hear them. He turned to her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her own hands, at the bag of bracelets. Who knows? He asked gently. My mom. She knows what they're really buying. It's not the bracelets, the devastating simplicity of it, the matter-of-fact tone. This was not a complaint. It was a statement of fact, like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. This is how the world works. Ezekiel's heart felt like a cold, hard stone in his chest. All his years as a social worker, all the broken children and shattered families. It never got easier. He took a deep breath, the air thick with the smell of gasoline. He chose his next words with infinite care. That's a heavy thing for a mother to know, and a heavy thing for a daughter to carry. She finally looked at him. Her pale blue eyes were searching his face, looking for judgment, for pity, for disgust. She found none. She only found a deep, weary sadness that matched her own. She says it's temporary, just until she gets a second job. She says it's not a big deal. They just talk. Both things can be true, Astrid. It can be temporary, and it can also be a very big deal. You're allowed to feel like it's a big deal. A tear, just one, escaped her left eye and tracked a clean path through the grime on her cheek. She swiped it away with the back of her hand, angry at the betrayal. I don't want to be a big deal. I just want... Her voice broke. She couldn't finish. I know, he said, his own voice thick. I know. He didn't move closer. He didn't offer a hug. The 10 feet between them felt sacred, a space she needed to control. He just stood there, a witness. He let the silence hold her pain. After a minute, she took a shuddering breath. Why are you here? She asked, the question sharp. What do you want? He finally answered the question she'd been asking with her eyes for weeks. My daughter's name is Chloe. When she was 15, she got her heart broken so bad she tried to disappear. She started getting quiet, started wearing long sleeves in the summer, started looking at the world like it was a place she didn't belong. I almost missed it. I was busy. I was tired. I was a social worker, for God's sake, and I almost missed the signs in my own house. He paused. the memory still raw after all these years. I see you, Astrid. I see you're carrying something too heavy, and I don't want you to have to carry it alone. That's it. That's all I want, to help you carry it. She stared at him, her lips parted slightly. He had given her the truth. Not a platitude, not a promise to fix everything, just the plain, unvarnished truth. He saw her. She didn't say anything else that night, but when her mother's car arrived, just as Astrid was about to get in, she turned back to him. "Your vest," she said. "It smells like my grandpa's garage. He used to let me help him fix his lawnmower." Ezekiel smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "That's a good smell." "Yeah," she said, a tiny smile touching her own lips for the first time. "It is." That small moment, that shared memory, was the first brick laid on a new foundation, a foundation of trust. The next week, Ezekiel brought a guest. His name was Bear, a mountain of a man who was the president of the Iron Covenant and a retired firefighter. Bear didn't say much. He just sat on the curb, drinking a soda, his presence doubling Ezekiel's. The cars that slowed down now saw two very large men in biker vests flanking a small girl, and they didn't just speed up, they practically fled. Astrid sold no bracelets that night. She watched the cars flee, a strange expression on her face. "Mom's going to be mad." Ezekiel nodded. "Probably." But she didn't look scared. For the first time, she looked relieved. The intervention, when it came, was quiet. It wasn't a raid. It wasn't an accusation. It was a conversation. Ezekiel had done his homework. He knew Petra, Astrid's mother, worked as a cleaner at a downtown office building, a job that barely covered their room in a weekly rate motel. She was 31, a high school dropout, and utterly alone. He found her on her lunch break, sitting on a bench in a small concrete park. He didn't come in his vest. He came in a simple polo shirt and jeans, looking like what he was, a retired man who was worried. He sat on the other end of the bench. "My name is Ezekiel Toussaint. I'm a friend of your daughter's." Petra's body went stiff. Her eyes, the same pale blue as Astrid's, but clouded with exhaustion, filled with fear and defiance. "We're fine. We don't need any help. I know you're doing the best you can," he said, his voice gentle. "I used to be a social worker. I know what desperation looks like. It looks a lot like you. And it breaks my heart that your daughter has to see it every day." She started to cry, silent, racking sobs that shook her whole body. She didn't try to hide it. The fight just went out of her. "I don't know what else to do," she whispered, her voice raw. "I'm so tired. Every time I get $1 ahead, the rent goes up or the car breaks down. I'm drowning, and I'm taking her with me." "I know," Ezekiel said. "But you're not alone anymore. My club, the Iron Covenant, we're good at mending things, cars, lives, whatever's broken. Let us help. If Bike Diaries has become a part of your week, if these stories of quiet heroes and resilient kids mean something to you, consider joining the channel membership. It's just a couple of bucks a month, and it's what keeps these stories on the road. The link is right below. And if you haven't already, please hit that hype button. Every single click helps. Now, let's finish this story. Help didn't look like a briefcase full of money. It looked like Bear, the club president, showing up with 2 of his guys and a set of tools to fix Petra's car. They replaced the cracked windshield. They changed the oil. They put 4 new, safe tires on it. The cost? Nothing. Just a promise from Petra to let them help her find a better way. Help looked like Sarah, the wife of another club member and a former HR manager, sitting with Petra for 3 hours, rewriting her resume and finding job listings for receptionist positions that paid twice what she was making as a cleaner. Help looked like the club pooling their money, not a lot, just $50 here, $100 there, to pay the deposit and first month's rent on a small, clean, two-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, just 7 miles from the gas station, but a world away. And Help looked like Ezekiel, still showing up for Astrid, not at the gas station anymore. Now, he picked her up from her new apartment on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They'd go to the park. Sometimes they'd just sit on a bench and talk. Sometimes he'd push her on the swings, her laughter light and free, a sound he'd never heard from her before. He was teaching her how to be a child again. She was enrolled in a real school. She was terrified at first, but she was smart, and she was tough. She made a friend, a girl named Maria. The first time she came home and talked about what Maria had said in class, her face was bright with a kind of normal, childish excitement that made Petra weep with gratitude in the other room. The bracelets were gone. The clear plastic baggie was gone. The rigid, braced posture was softening. It was still there sometimes when she was startled or scared, but it was no longer her default setting. She was learning to stand in the world without her armor on. Her 11th birthday was in October. Ezekiel asked her what she wanted. "I don't know," she'd said. "I've never had a real birthday before." The words were still matter-of-fact, but now there was a question in them, a hint of hope. So, Ezekiel and the Iron Covenant threw her a party. Not a big, overwhelming affair, just a small gathering in the clubhouse. There were a dozen members, their wives, and a few of their kids. There was pizza and soda. There was a pile of presents, books, a new bike, art supplies. And there was a cake. It was a simple sheet cake from the grocery store. It had purple frosting, the deep purple of a twilight sky. And on it, in careful white icing, it said, "Happy birthday, Astrid." It had 12 candles, one for each year, and one to grow on. When they brought it out, singing, Astrid just stared. Her eyes were wide. She looked from the glowing candles to the faces around her, all smiling at her. Not at something they wanted from her. Petra stood behind her, her hands on her daughter's shoulders, tears streaming down her face. "Make a wish, honey," she whispered. Astrid took a deep breath, the kind of deep breath you take before a plunge, and blew. All 12 candles went out in a single puff. The room erupted in cheers. Later, as the party was winding down, Astrid found Ezekiel by his bike, polishing a piece of chrome. She stood beside him, silent for a long moment. "What did you wish for?" he asked, not looking at her. She shook her head. "Can't tell you, or it won't come true." He chuckled. "Fair enough." She reached out and touched the anvil patch on his vest. "Ezekiel? Yeah, little bit? What does a hug feel like?" His hand stopped moving. The rag fell from his fingers. He turned and looked down at her. Her face was earnest, open, vulnerable. It was the bravest question he had ever heard. He knelt, slowly, so he was at her eye level. His big body trembled slightly. "It feels like this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you want it to." He opened his arms. He didn't reach for her. He waited. She looked at his open arms. She looked at his face, at the tears welling in his own eyes. And then she stepped forward and wrapped her skinny arms around his thick neck. He closed his arms around her, gently, carefully, as if he were holding the most precious, fragile thing in the world. Her small body fit against his chest. He could feel her heart beating, fast and steady. She held on, tight. He held on, too. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A hug in a clubhouse parking lot. A wish made on a grocery store cake. The quiet promise of a man who saw a child drowning and refused to let her go under. It was the whole job, just showing up. And sometimes that's enough to mend the world. Thank you for watching this story about Astrid, a girl who was forced to be a grown-up too soon, and Ezekiel, the man who remembered what it was to be a child. The kind of quiet exploitation Astrid faced is tragically common. It thrives in the shadows of desperation, where parents feel they have no other options, and children learn to equate their worth with what they can provide. It's a gray area that can quickly lead to much darker places. According to organizations that fight child exploitation, this soft grooming, exposing children to transactional relationships under the guise of harmlessness, is a critical first step for predators. It normalizes the idea that attention and affection from adults can be bought and sold. If you see a child in a situation that doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. You don't have to be a hero. You can be a presence. You can be a safe adult. You can contact organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children or your local child protective services. They have the resources and training to intervene safely and effectively. A simple call can change a life. Subscribe to Bike Diaries for more stories about the quiet heroes who ride among us. Hit that hype button to boost this video and help it reach someone who needs to see it. And if you want to support what we do and ensure we can keep telling these stories, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is to simply see them. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, the rumbling sound of a Harley echoed through the parking lot of Astrid's apartment complex. She ran out the door, a grin splitting her face. She was wearing jeans and a purple t-shirt, and her hair was in a long braid down her back. Ezekiel sat on his road glide, a small, brand-new helmet in his hands. It was also purple. "You ready for your first ride?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes shining. She took the helmet, her hands running over its smooth surface. Petra came out and watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, a small, peaceful smile on her face. She had a new job as a receptionist at a dental office. The hours were steady, the pay was enough, the car was reliable. Astrid put on the helmet and clipped the strap under her chin. It fit perfectly. Ezekiel helped her onto the seat behind him. "Hold on tight," he said. Her arms wrapped around his waist, her hands clutching the front of his leather vest. It was a different kind of hold now, not a desperate grasp for warmth, but a confident embrace, a hug in motion. He kicked the bike into gear, and with a low, powerful roar, they pulled out of the parking lot and onto the open road. The world blurred past them in a riot of green and blue. Astrid leaned into the turn, a part of the bike, a part of the man guiding it. She wasn't holding on for dear life anymore. She was just holding on. And for the first time, she felt the freedom of moving forward, with nothing to sell, and nowhere to be but right here. Not every day was easy, not yet, but she was learning to ride it out.